I stood silently in the kitchen, my hands trembling around a chipped coffee mug, when I heard her voice. My daughter. Whispering into her phone, unaware I was just a room away. He's getting old, forgetful. Maybe a senior home would be better. Her words pierced deeper than I thought possible. I felt the air leave my lungs, replaced by a dull ache that settled into my chest like a weight. This house, this home, was my life's work. Every brick, every corner, every creaky floorboard held a memory. I had built it from the ground up. I raised her here. I watched her take her first steps in the living room, cry through heartbreaks in the kitchen, and celebrate birthdays in the backyard. Now I was just an old man who misplaced his glasses too often, who asked the same question twice, who took up too much space. A burden. Something she was trying to manage, or remove. It wasn't always like this. We used to laugh together, cook together, sit up late talking about life and dreams. But time has a cruel way of making the people closest to you drift away while standing right in front of you. Her husband barely acknowledged me. Their conversations became quieter when I walked in. And the warmth I used to feel when she hugged me? Gone. Replaced by quick, obligatory gestures and tight-lipped smiles. I didn't say anything that day. I simply turned, walked back to my room, and stared at the wall, realizing I was no longer a part of her world. Not truly. Just a fading photograph hanging in the hallway. I wasn't sure what hurt more, her words, or how easily she said them. That night, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, and memories flooded in, uninvited but vivid. I remembered the nights I sat by her bedside, holding a cold cloth to her feverish forehead, whispering lullabies when the medicine wouldn't work fast enough. I remembered her tiny hand gripping mine, her tearful eyes begging me not to leave for my night shift. But I had to. We needed the money. I worked 2 jobs back then, sometimes 3, skipping meals so she could eat, ignoring my own exhaustion just to make sure she had what every other kid had, and more. One memory stood out, her senior prom. She had fallen in love with this sky-blue dress that shimmered like morning light. It was expensive, far more than I could afford. But I couldn't bear to see her disappointed. So I picked up extra shifts, cleaned garages, fixed fences, whatever I could. The day I surprised her with that dress, she cried and hugged me so tight, like I was her whole world. Back then, I was. Now, years later, I shuffle around the same living room we once danced in, while her husband frowns every time my feet drag too loudly on the floor. He calls me old man instead of dad. The warmth in this house has faded. My opinions are ignored. My stories are cut short. They talk around me, not with me. I've grown quieter, not because I have nothing to say, but because no one seems to listen anymore. My hands ache from arthritis, my back bends with age, but the heaviest burden I carry is being forgotten by the one person I gave everything for. The morning was quiet, like most mornings lately. My daughter was rushing out the door again, dressed sharp, makeup flawless, heading to brunch with friends. She barely looked at me, just tossed a half-smile over her shoulder. "Don't forget to take your pills," she said, like I was some patient, not her father. As the door closed behind her, a strange calm washed over me. That's when I made the decision. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out a dusty metal box, the one she had forgotten even existed. Inside was the original house deed. Still in my name. She never asked. She just assumed the house was hers now, like everything else. I stared at the paper for a long time, not with bitterness, but clarity. This place that once felt like a warm cocoon had become a prison of silence. I didn't belong here anymore, and maybe, neither did she. I contacted a real estate agent. Quietly. Quickly. Within days, there were offers. Strong ones. And by the end of the week, the house was sold. Just like that. Not for revenge. No part of me wanted to hurt her. This was never about punishment, it was about remembering something she had lost somewhere along the way, that love isn't about ownership or convenience. It doesn't cling. It gives. It frees. It sacrifices, even when unrecognized. I packed my things slowly, one memory at a time. Every photo, every frame, every echo in those walls had its time. I left behind nothing but a note and a key on the kitchen counter. She thought I was old, tired, weak. But what she didn't realize was that I still had the power to choose what love really meant. And this was my final gift. She came home later that afternoon, humming a tune, a shopping bag swinging from her arm. But the second she saw unfamiliar cars in the driveway and strangers opening the front door, her world stopped. Confused, then furious, she demanded answers from the new homeowners. That's when they told her, the house had been sold. Legally. Fairly. Signed and sealed. She called me, her voice shaking. "Dad, how could you do this? Where are you? What's going on?" I could hear the panic, the hurt, and underneath it, the guilt. But I didn't answer right away. I asked her to meet me at our old park. The one where she used to feed the ducks as a little girl. When she arrived, she looked different. Smaller, somehow. Not with age, but with vulnerability. She sat beside me on the bench, her eyes searching mine, desperate for an explanation. I didn't say much. Just reached into my coat pocket and handed her an envelope. She opened it, expecting, what? Apology? Anger? Inside was a check for the full sale amount of the house. More than enough for a new beginning. But what caught her breath was the note folded beneath it, in my shaky handwriting. For your future, my child. Just remember, you were always my home, even when I wasn't yours anymore. Tears welled in her eyes as the silence stretched between us. No blame. No demands. Just the raw truth of a father's love. She finally looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in years, she saw not a burden, not an old man, but the father who had given her everything, one last time. She cried. Not the kind of tears that come from shock or frustration, but the deep, aching kind that only surface when the heart finally wakes up. Her shoulders shook as years of unspoken emotion spilled out, regret, guilt, love. And I let her cry. I didn't interrupt. I didn't scold. I just opened my arms, and she collapsed into them like the little girl I once carried through storms. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. That hug, long, silent, and soul-deep, said everything. For the first time in years, it wasn't about obligations or roles. It wasn't about who paid the bills or who forgot to take their pills. It was about us. A father. A daughter. Two hearts finally realigned after drifting too far apart. She held the letter tightly, like it was something sacred. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely able to get the words out. I just nodded, brushing her hair behind her ear like I used to when she was small. "I know," I said. And I did. I had waited a long time for that moment, not for revenge or recognition, but for this. A return to something pure. Something real. That day, we didn't fix everything. Life doesn't work that neatly. But we found something more important, understanding. And the beginning of healing. As we sat side by side on that old park bench, watching the breeze ripple through the trees, we smiled, not at what we had lost, but at what we had found again. In the end, it wasn't the house that mattered. It never was. It was the home we rebuilt in each other's hearts. In the end, this wasn't a story about a house. It was a story about a father's quiet love and a daughter's forgotten heart. Through pain, distance, and years of silence, a man who had given everything found the strength to give one final gift, not out of spite, but out of love. And in that selfless act, something incredible happened. His daughter finally saw him, not as a burden, but as the man who had always been her home. Sometimes, it takes losing something we take for granted to realize its true worth. And sometimes, love doesn't raise its voice, it simply steps away, so the silence can speak louder than words ever could. This story reminds us that real love doesn't control, demand, or resent, it gives, forgives, and waits patiently to be seen again. Because in the end, what we build with our hearts lasts far longer than any house ever could.